Hello and welcome to the 64th season of the Colorado Shakespeare Festival and our production of The Odyssey, adapted by Mary Zimmerman. Our 2021 season also includes A Midsummer Night's Dream and an original practices production of Pericles. My name is Amanda Giguère, and I am CSF's Director of Outreach, and I'm also the dramaturg on this production. I'm filming this video from the traditional lands of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Ute nations. The goal of this video is to give you some context for the performance that you will see, which we hope will deepen your experience when you join us at the Mary Rippon Outdoor Theater. So let's start with a plot synopsis. The Trojan War is over and all the Greeks have sailed home, and the Odyssey is the story about Odysseus, one of those Greeks, trying to get back home to Ithaca. It's also the story about his son, Telemachus, growing up. It's also the story about the gods on Mount Olympus who watch over the mortals and occasionally intervene. So when the play begins, Odysseus has been trying to get home for years, and he's now stranded on Calypso's island. Back in Ithaca, his wife, Penelope, and his son, Telemachus, are waiting for his return, but they're losing hope. Their house is filled with suitors vying for Penelope's hand, and these unwelcome guests are destroying the house, and they're pressuring Penelope to choose a new husband. On Mount Olympus, the goddess Athena begs Zeus to intervene. It has been long enough, she argues, so let's help Odysseus get home. Athena also prompts Telemachus, Odysseus' son, to flee Ithaca and go off in search of news of his father. So thanks to Athena's intervention with Zeus, Odysseus leaves Calypso's island, and he arrives in Phaeacia, where King Alcinous invites the stranger to tell his story. Odysseus does. He recounts all of his adventures since leaving Troy, and as he recounts them to the Phaeacians, we, the audience, watch the events play out on stage. Odysseus resisted the temptation of the lotus eaters, outsmarted the Cyclops, visited Circe, who turned the men into pigs, visited the underworld, sailed past the sirens, and survived a sea monster. All of Odysseus's men died along the journey, and Odysseus then ended up on Calypso's island, where he remained for 8 years. When Odysseus concludes his tale, King Alcinous helps Odysseus finally return to Ithaca. Athena then reveals herself to Odysseus, and she reassures him she has been at his side this whole time. But there's one more thing he has to do. He must defeat Penelope's suitors. Athena reunites Odysseus with his son, Telemachus, who has returned from his travels. Athena, Odysseus, Telemachus, and an old trusty swineherd named Eumaeus team up to kill all the suitors, which is a gruesome, daunting, and irreversible task. Penelope and Odysseus are reunited, and the gods make plans to restore peace in Ithaca. Along with the Iliad, the Odyssey is one of the oldest stories we have in Western literature. It was likely composed in the 8th or the 7th century BCE. It's an epic poem of 12,000 lines, told in 24 sections or books. Although scholarship has gone back and forth about whether this poem was written by a single poet or a group of people, today's scholars generally agree that it was written by a poet named Homer, about whom we know nothing. The text we have of the Odyssey is a copy of a copy, based on medieval manuscripts, but it is very likely that the poem emerged rather from an oral tradition than a written tradition, an oral tradition in which a bard or a rhapsode would have memorized and recited the poem at a group gathering, very much like what we will see bards do in the performance of the Odyssey at the Rippon. The text has a lot of epithets, repeated phrases, like rosy-fingered dawn, or the wine-dark sea, which is very indicative of an oral tradition because it makes the words easier to memorize. The poem's also written in a rhythm called dactylic hexameter, which, unlike iambic pentameter, Shakespeare's rhythm, which sounds like this, ba-bum, 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 dactylic hexameter is bum-ba-ba-bum-ba-ba-bum-ba-ba, bum-ba-ba-bum-ba-ba-bum-ba-ba. It's a little different. A Trojan War recap might be helpful here. The Trojan War was a conflict between the city of Troy and the rest of the Greek armies. It lasted for 10 years, and it occurred sometime around 1250 BCE. According to tradition, the Trojan prince Paris abducted Helen, wife of Menelaus, and took her back to Troy. Menelaus then complained to his brother, King Agamemnon, a very powerful Greek. Agamemnon then gathered all the Greek leaders to attack Troy in retaliation. In some accounts of the Trojan War, Odysseus came up with the idea that ended the war. The Greeks built a giant wooden horse with soldiers hidden inside, and they left it at the gates of Troy. The Trojans, believing it was a gift from the gods and that the war was over, brought the horse inside, and then, later that night, the Greeks attacked them. The Odyssey is set many, many years after the Trojan War has ended, and it begins right in the middle of Odysseus' journey home, in Medias Res. When Odysseus tells his tale to the Phaeacians, we then go back in time to learn of his experiences since leaving Troy. There are several famous adaptations and translations of the Odyssey. In 1616, the English writer George Chapman published the very first English translation of the Odyssey, and that was written in iambic pentameter. This translation was so influential that exactly 2 centuries later, it was memorialized in a sonnet by John Keats titled "On First Looking into Chapman's Homer." It's a beautiful poem if you get a chance to read it. The English translation that our audience may be most familiar with is Robert Fitzgerald's 1961 translation. The performance you will see at the Colorado Shakespeare Festival was adapted by Mary Zimmerman, a theater director also known for her innovative adaptation of Ovid's Metamorphoses. Zimmerman based her adaptation on the Fitzgerald translation. She also directed the production of the Odyssey that appeared at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival in 2017. And our producing artistic director, Tim Orr, was in the audience at the OSF production and was inspired to direct the play here in Colorado. More recently, Emily Wilson published a translation in 2017 which used iambic pentameter, and it's been praised for its fresh and contemporary, very simple and clear language. I have my copy right here, and it's a beautiful read if you're looking to supplement your preparation before viewing the performance. So as one of our oldest stories in the Western world, the Odyssey has inspired many, many artists. It's been adapted into novels and films, including James Joyce's Ulysses, the Coen brothers' O Brother, Where Art Thou?, and Margaret Atwood's Penelopiad, and very recently, Madeline Miller's novel Circe. So this production at the Colorado Shakespeare Festival is directed by Tim Orr, and his approach to the story is that it's filled with life lessons. It's a play about survival, about getting home, facing your end, raising children, dealing with parents. It's a very human story about moving through challenges. This production is not set in a literal place, but in a theatrical space, a space of the imagination where we can move easily from a desert island to a royal palace to the Cyclops cave. When we stage a play at our theater in Boulder, we always want to ask ourselves, why this play today? First, the Odyssey is all about struggles and obstacles. This was a play that we were scheduled to stage in 2020, and seeing this play now come to life in 2021, we see even more clearly the story's emphasis on facing hard, if not impossible, circumstances and finding a way through them. And after the year and a half that we have all been through, a story about overcoming one obstacle after another seems like it was written for us right now. So I invite you to think about, when you come to see the play, what does it mean to struggle, to fight for something? For Odysseus, it's the hope of returning to his family. So what's the thing that you would fight for against all odds? The play is also very much about stories and storytelling. It invites us to think about why stories matter, why we gather in circles to tell stories, and how do they build connections, build knowledge, and build community. We see so many examples in the Odyssey of people telling stories to others, whether it's the bard who performs at the court of Alcinous, or Menelaus telling Telemachus about his father, or even the suitor in Ithaca who asks, how will we be spoken of in times to come? This is a world in which stories matter. Stories are how we shape meaning, or bring back the past, or transcend time. Another key question raised in the poem: how do we treat strangers? Throughout the Odyssey, we see that strangers are welcomed with open arms and treated as if any one of them might be a god. The world of the Odyssey operates with a deeply ingrained sense of hospitality, in which you welcome a guest, you make sure they are comfortable, fed, bathed, and treated well, and then you ask them for their story. When you join us at the Mary Rippon Outdoor Theater to experience the Odyssey with us, we invite you to take what you need from it. As Odysseus navigates hard choices and faces his own mortality and returns to his family, we hope you are able to reflect on your journey and the stories that matter to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Theater going is a very different experience this year, and we're so grateful that you are helping us to keep theater alive and well in these uncertain times. Enjoy the performance.